Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here, although on the phone, with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. So I had contacted you, and people will know this when this airs because I'll put it up as a special episode. But I had contacted you and said, hey, I am really existentially concerned about what's been going on in the country, and I kind of want to talk about that, and I would kind of like to put an episode out about that, and you agreed to do that, and I really appreciate that, but I think this might end up just being therapy for Mike more than anything else.
All right. I've done my share of that.
Yeah, absolutely, you have. So, where's your head at?
I am incredibly saddened and disgusted. I kept thinking as I watched the videos of rioters and the mob storming the United States Capitol, of that plane of American citizens on 9/11 that dove the plane to their own deaths to avoid allowing damage to the Capitol. And in the fields of Pennsylvania, of all places.
Right. And
then you have these people storming the Capitol and being destructive and carrying off podiums and tearing down signs and throwing litter in the congressional offices. To me, it's disgusting and disrespectful and abhorrent. And I don't care what your political agenda is. I don't think that it should be allowed. And then I also have some real concerns about how were the decisions made regarding police behaviors, the National Guard, and so on. When did those triggers get pulled? When did orders be given? Why were they not given sooner? Who was in the way? What's going on behind the scenes with the police in the Capitol? Whose side are they on? And I'm sorry that 5 people died. Right. In the midst of all that.
Oh, is it up to 5? I had heard 4, but
a police officer died. 3 people died with health issues, and 1 woman was shot and killed.
Oh, yeah, the police officer. That's right. Yeah. Well, there's an investigation into that, so maybe we'll
there are a bunch of investigations ongoing, but the point of it happening in America, just dismays me beyond words.
Well, the idea that that building had not been breached since the War of 1812.
Well, and that was British soldiers.
Right.
That wasn't American citizens.
Well, but I mean, just think about it. That means that during the Civil War, that building was not breached. And yet then in this day, people just walked in. They just walked in and had their way with the place. And apparently, it seems their agenda may have been to have taken hostages. They had zip ties on their persons. And when they got to the Senate chamber, they were saying, where are all the people? Where are the people? And that is terrifying to me. Can you imagine what the optics of that would have been if they would have taken even one hostage?
Now, that is no different from what the right-wing militant group in Michigan planned to do with the governor of Michigan.
Exactly.
There are groups in this country that are willing to do that. But
I think that group was willing to do it.
It may have been. It may have been. Who knows? We don't know enough yet. It's too early to have that kind of speculation and that kind of response. I'm just having the visceral gut reaction that a mob of American citizens and people that presented themselves as Trump supporters felt that it was okay to desecrate a sacred place in pursuit of their rage. And what else were they in pursuit of? They were going to destroy the Constitution. They were going to overturn the election. Or they're just going to scream and yell and be horrible and say, we're angry because we didn't get our way.
Well, and again, if we don't know whether they were willing to take hostages, we may not know what their agenda was. It certainly seemed
it's a nebulous day, Michael. There were thousands of people there. You might have had 50 or 100 who had a specific agenda, and the other thousands would be like, oh, well, we didn't mean that. We were just protesting. We have a right to protest. But the guy from Arkansas that was in the speaker's chair, I saw him interviewed this morning on the news, and he was like, that's my chair. I paid for it. I pay taxes. I'm a citizen. She doesn't work for me the way I want her to, so I was just going to sit in the chair and do what I want. Well, it's criminal. There are laws in this country.
He's going to do that from jail now.
It remains to be seen. He's been arrested.
Well, he's been arrested. So, I mean, whether or not he gets charged with something and gets convicted, right, we don't know. But for right now, he's going to do it in jail.
Right.
And that's something that when I had said, hey, let's do this, and we got on the phone before we started, you had asked me, well, what is your idea about this? What's your agenda? What do you want to do? And, there are two things that I think I would like to think about is, number one, can we look at this and can we establish a set of facts that we can all agree on? Because I think that's where we come.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if the idea is that, as Donald Trump has coined the phrase alternative facts, if everybody just gets to have whatever set of facts that they want, then we can't do that. But so that would be number one, is can we establish a set of facts that we can all agree on? And number two, can we, as a nation, or at least a majority of a nation, come together, and instead of being Democrats and Republicans, Trump supporters, never Trumpers, instead of having labels, can we just be Americans? Is there a way to do that?
Well, that would be the idealized goal. It takes leadership, and it takes leadership and a willingness on the part of the people. Kellyanne Conway is the one that came up with alternative facts. Mm-hmm. If we have facts from Newsmax, facts from Fox, facts from MSNBC, facts from Facebook, facts from Instagram, and they don't agree, then we don't have facts.
Right.
And we have audiences in their little cubby holes that only hear what they hear. And they're positioning themselves to say all the other people are bad people. Mm-hmm. And I'm disgusted with them and angry with them, and so I don't have anything that I want to hear from them. I just want my way. Mm-hmm. And if that's where we stay, then this country's in real trouble. Your description of what needs to happen is an idealized one, but the correct one.
And we see now that there are Republicans who remained committed to the agenda of disrupting the Electoral College, which is what the goal of...
Even after the riots.
Right.
There are 127 congressmen still voted, and women, to overturn the election.
And some of them are now starting to get some flack. So Josh Hawley, who is from Missouri, where we live, is one of those individuals who continued to rail against the adoption of the Electoral College results, and he's now in Missouri starting to get some real flack. So I wonder, does that mean that people have said, okay, this is a step too far? Mitch McConnell has disavowed the actions that happened on Wednesday. Lindsey Graham has disavowed. Those are two of Trump's primary supporters. Mike Pence wouldn't do what Trump wanted him to do, which was to not accept the Electoral College results. So does this show a division or a leaving of Trump behind by the Republican leaders, or is this just a flash in the pan?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. I think there's an immediate visceral reaction on the part of some of the Republicans of horrified shock and dismay about what was done, the specific behaviors of what was done in the Capitol. Now, whether that impacts their political agenda and their political maneuvering, their strategies for themselves and their goals about policy remains to be seen. Will it have a real life impact on their willingness to compromise, to negotiate, to move towards solution of problems, or they're just going to retreat to their original non-neutral corner and advocate for what they've been advocating all along? Right. So and that involves a lot of demonization of the other.
Okay, so I'm going to lay out my dream or my fantasy of what is going to happen, and then you tell me if there's any chance or if this is just pure delusion. Okay?
Yeah.
So Joe Biden gets elected president, which was not a guarantee, and even early in the election results didn't necessarily look like it was going to happen, right? And then we have the Georgia Senate races that have to be runoffs, and the Democratic candidates in those Senate races didn't perform well on the day of the original election, but end up winning those 2 seats. So now all of Congress and the presidency is Democratic, and Joe Biden, if there's one thing that he does know how to do, it is how to compromise and get compromise agreed to in a room. So now, after the distaste of everything that happened on Wednesday, these guys actually do come together, and the leaders in the Senate, so Mitch McConnell, who's now not Republican or majority leader, but is minority leader, he recognizes, hey, we need to work together as a body, and we actually have some cooperation that happens on coronavirus relief and on vaccine distribution, and it really does herald a new day of cooperation in Congress, which sets the tone for the country, and people start to feel good about government. And then we all say, okay, yes, this is a healing moment, and we can all get behind what's going on in 2021 ends on just an beautiful note. We're all holding hands, singing "We Are the World" on Christmas Eve.
So what do you want me to say?
I mean, is that a complete delusion, or is there any possibility?
It's an absolutely complete delusion, right. And it's an ahistorical expression of reality.
Okay.
Go back to 2008 when Obama was elected. Mitch McConnell, in the minority, he was the minority leader at that time. The Democrats had control of the Senate. Had a meeting with his people and said, we are the party of no. We will not allow Obama to be successful. Right. We will make sure that our goal is to have him be a one-term president. And so for the next 12 years, or 8 years, the Republicans said no to everything Obama wanted done in the way of policy. And that's the position that they took then. Why do you think that would be different now with Joe Biden?
Well, because in 2001, when George Bush was president and 9/11 happened, Democrats and Republicans did come together, and they passed a lot of legislation that had to do with domestic security and things like that. And there were people. I mean, I remember in the subdivision that I live in, people. I mean, I don't think there was a single house that did not fly an American flag for probably almost 3 months.
Right. Individual Americans who are passionate about this stuff or even aware of this stuff have strong feelings. I think they have strong feelings about what just happened in the United States Capitol. Is that going to affect the fine, arcane art of political negotiations in the Congress? I would say no. Okay. I don't believe those guys are that patriotic or that open to negotiation and compromise.
No, but if they're anything, they are survivors, and they know which way the wind blows. They can sense it. Yeah. And if there are enough Americans who are disgusted with this and say, "Hey, we really are honestly done," then they may end up finding that it's within their existential best interest to say, okay, we're going to cooperate. And we got to the point.
Yeah, but the challenge there is how to message it. Yeah. Where do these messages come from? Do both sides leaders stand up in Congress and say our true, honest, legitimate belief is that we need to come together and do things for the good of the country? Or do they say, I think you're bad, I think you're stupid, I think you're ignorant, and I am opposed to you and everything you stand for, and so I'll put myself in the way and stop it?
Well, if congressional leadership contacted me as a consultant, as a psychological consultant, and asked me what should be done, that's exactly what I would say, is that the leaders have to stand arm in arm and say, look, this is enough. We are setting a new course. We are charting a new direction, and we are going to work together. That's going to be the new... So
you believe that there was some kind of an epiphany that the Republican leadership experienced on Wednesday that will cause them to say,
and here's why. Because when they came back Wednesday night and Mitch McConnell was reading his statement, he was crying. And so was Mike Pence. And so was Lindsey Graham. They were moved by what had happened. They were, number one, they were terrified. And number two, they couldn't imagine that something like that could happen in the Capitol building of the United States of America. And I believe that they believe that we can't go back to the kind of alternative fact reality that allowed that to take place.
So you think they're going to experience some level of PTSD and have a come to Jesus moment and be better people?
I hope so.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, this is what I tell my clients. If you only base your conclusions about tomorrow on your experience from yesterday, then you preclude the possibility that any person or anything can change. And I know that that's not true. I've changed. You have seen me change. People change.
I believe in change. I believe in hope and change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just, it is difficult for me to imagine that those men and women could have had that visceral reaction that they had Wednesday night and be moved the way that they were and then just go back to politics as normal. Now,
Ted Cruz is already doing it.
Well,
Josh
Ted
Hawley
Cruz
and Ted Cruz both sent out fundraising requests during the middle of the damn riot.
Right, but Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley weren't moved. They weren't individuals. No. They came back with the same agenda that they evacuated with.
And so did 125 others.
Well, but most of those were in the House of Representatives. There were only, 6 senators, I think?
6 senators, yes.
Out of 50. So,
and I think 2 of them brand new senators who had not voted for anything yet.
Exactly. And they just were, I think, probably most of them didn't feel like they had enough juice to stand up against Donald Trump and the Donald Trump nation. And so they voted the way that they did to hedge their bets.
Let's talk about the 6 senators. The new senators were Marshall from Kansas and Tuberville from Georgia. And they both ran on the Trump program saying we need to be more like him and do more of what he wants because he's right for America. And so when this happened and they voted that he had to be president and the election didn't matter because Democrats stole it.
Right.
Then they didn't change because the Capitol was assaulted.
No. And those people may be dyed-in-the-wool believers.
Yeah.
And so they may be being true to themselves because they believe that. But Mitch McConnell doesn't believe that. And so the people who have been there for a long time and know how Washington can work, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and people like that, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, those people, I believe, were genuinely moved by what happened and that they could be motivated to choose cooperation. And I believe that they are going to be motivated by that if the right circumstances can come into place, if enough people can remain connected to their visceral reaction to what happened on Wednesday and demand it.
I believe there's a window of opportunity. I hope they utilize it.
Yeah, so I guess how would we encourage people to be a part of that movement? I guess that what you have to do is write your senators and your representatives and let them know that you support that idea of cooperation. And if enough people do that to make it seem like that their livelihoods and best interests lie in that direction, then that will help cement this epiphany.
So it's easier psychologically to be an againer. I'm again it. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in that. I'm opposed to that. I want to stop that. What's hard is to be a positive approach person. What are you for? Mm-hmm. So I think they have to talk in terms of these are the goals that we have. This is what we're for. And what is that? Are we for healthcare? Are we for education? Are we for better roads? Are we for reduced taxes? Are we for better budget management? And then when you get into the details of all those things, the patriotic glow of the beautiful Capitol dome with the sunset over it begins to fade.
Yeah,
it gets down to the nitty gritty, and people are making deals, and it's like, well, I'll give you this, you give me that. Mm-hmm. And the challenge, I think, your point about having citizens contact their representatives, citizens need to be saying, this is what I'm for. I'm for civility. I'm for courtesy. I'm for conversation. I'm for facts.
Right.
So, to the degree that people will do that or can do that, it might be helpful. I hope it would be.
Well, I think that that's exactly, yes, what I am saying is that rather than the nitty gritty of I'm for better roads being, writing that letter and saying I'm for civility and cooperation, because I remember when I was a child in the 1970s, Congress worked in a way where they passed stuff. And nobody was ever completely satisfied with what got passed because it was a compromise. But good things happened because they compromised and passed stuff. And nobody ever got everything they wanted, but everybody got some of what they wanted. And if we could go back to a time like that, I think it would be transcendent.
I'm not sure we ever lived in that time. I think your memories are somewhat rose-colored glass memories.
Well, I was a child, so I may have looked at it with uncompromising naivete.
History comes in waves, and critical moments occur, and people make little steps forward, and they get what they can get, and then the wind changes, the pendulum swings.
Mm-hmm.
Lyndon Johnson managed to accomplish most of the goals of John Kennedy that John Kennedy wasn't able to accomplish because he wasn't that strong a president. He got assassinated. Johnson knew how to manipulate the Senate and got most of the political goals that Kennedy had espoused passed. But then Johnson got swept up in the Vietnam War and didn't run for another term. And things changed. So, life continues. Reality intrudes. And people make little progressive steps. And so we had voter election laws that said Jim Crow laws are wrong and black people need to be able to vote. And more of them are going to. And the federal government's going to come in and watch these southern states and make sure that they don't prevent that from happening. And those laws passed. And more black people voted. But then the courts ruled, no, we don't need that law anymore. We don't have to watch those states anymore. They won't behave that way anymore. But it has been a considered agenda of the Republican Party for the United States to broadcast the message of voter fraud and the need to restrict access to the polls. There has not been any systemic voter fraud proven or provable in any United States election in the last 30 years. There are isolated examples you can find. My mother-in-law is sick and didn't go vote, so I got an absentee ballot and voted for her. That's voter fraud. If I did that, that would be illegal. They can find isolated examples of that, but they cannot find any systemic evidence of voter fraud or stolen elections. But that's still what people are out there shouting and screaming. They went into the United States Capitol Wednesday saying that.
Right.
And so therefore, we're not going to accept this.
And I understand that is completely irrational, and so trying to make a rational argument against it makes no sense. But for every person who thinks that the election was stolen by the Democrats, there was not a single ballot that was only printed for President of the United States. All of those ballots would have had people under them, right?
Yeah,
running for
absolutely.
Senate. And so how did they steal it for president? Because in every other race, now obviously this most recent runoff, both of the Democrats won. But back in November when we had the presidential election, in every other race, Republicans won. So if somebody was going to steal the election, why would they have stolen the election and only tipped the scale of the presidential race? Why wouldn't that doesn't make any logical sense.
Right.
And I understand that to say that to somebody who, believes that happened, that rational argument doesn't matter to them, and they would be able to rationalize that away. But
they go to whataboutism. Well, what about this that the Democrats did? What about this that the Democrats did? As a way of saying we don't want to talk about the information that you're presenting or the target that you're looking at.
Right.
So we're talking about health care then they want to talk about socialism. You talk about socialism, they want to talk about the Supreme Court. You talk about the Supreme Court, they want to talk about the riots in Portland.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just like chasing Jello.
Yeah. And that's what I said, is that I understand that those kinds of rational arguments don't work when you're talking about an irrational belief. But it's amazing to me that people can, in good conscience. And the truth is, I know people who say those things, people that I actually like and respect, who do say those things, and I don't know. I don't even know how to react. I don't know how to respond, because I recognize if somebody that I believe is a rational person is reporting that as their belief, I don't even know how to respond to that, because I don't want to upset them. But at the same time, I mean, the only thing I can say is I don't believe that same thing.
Well, then you go back to the old quotation, I don't agree with anything you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it.
Well, actually, that's actually very helpful, because I do that is exactly how I feel. And I know that you know people who say those things as well. What do you say? Do you get into the argument, or do you just say, I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it?
Well, we discussed it for a while, and we reached an impasse, and then that's what we say.
Yeah.
You're still my friend. I still like you. I respect you, and but I disagree with you.
Yeah. So I guess the takeaway from this is that the sun's going to come up tomorrow, and it's going to come up for 12 more days, and then Joe Biden is going to be inaugurated. President Trump has now committed to a smooth transition of power, although he will not attend the inauguration. And then on January 21st, do you think this all just melts away and we're right back to politics as normal?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes me sad.
It's human nature.
I know.
You, as a psychologist, you should know a little bit more about human nature than that.
Yeah.
I believe in critical moments, directional changes can occur. People do change. I believe in the capacity to change. You have to want to change, and you have to do the work of change. And in this case, there's an opportunity. It's like PTSD. Because of a trauma, there's an opportunity to really examine how you're interacting, what you believe, how you got to where you are, and asking, how can I go forward to be different? Ideally, large numbers of us will do that. Realistically, I don't think so.
So I heard on the radio this morning that Cliven Bundy had come out and said that the people who did this on Wednesday were patriots and heroes, and he was really, really praising them. And there's going to be a contingent of people in the United States that are going to support that action no matter what we do.
Right.
Yeah. And this is my conundrum, is that I kind of feel like unless those of us who are rational and, think of ourselves as rational and say, okay, we've had enough, we would like to see cooperation, we would probably be fairly cordial. So we wouldn't want to make this an issue. But I'm afraid if we don't make it an issue, then the only people, because the people who want to say that the people who stormed the Capitol were patriots, they're going to be vocal about what they believe. If those
they're already saying it was really secret Antifa people that dressed up like right-wing patriots.
Right. And so if the rest of us, which I believe is the minority or the majority, if the majority of us who believe that was disgusting and appalling and can't be allowed to stand, unless we actively, vocally voice that opinion, then I'm afraid that other radical opinion is the only voice that gets heard. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. I think most of us want to live in our little bubble and have our experience be safe and acceptable, and then idealize what we think everybody else ought to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so there needs to be commonly shared knowledge, values, orientations, and not in a lockstep communistic way, but in a generally agreed way. This is how we want to live our lives. This is the country we want to live in. This is what we believe in. And so if you believe in something like freedom of speech, then you have to be willing to listen to somebody else have something to say, even when you disagree with it.
Yeah.
And you have to be respectful. If you believe that people in the United States shouldn't be food challenged in a pandemic, then you have to do something personally about making sure people have something to eat.
Mm-hmm.
So you take your own step. You put 1 foot forward. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So
you're saying
what you can.
Be the change that you want to see in the world. Yeah,
exactly.
That's actually very, very good advice. That's a great note to end this on. So again, thank you for being willing to do an impromptu phone call. I really appreciate that. It just feels like it was so much. I mean, the episode that went out this week was the episode we did with Dr. Tobler on vaccines and treatments for coronavirus. And I felt so great about that episode. I really thought that was good work, and it sounded really, really good. And then now we're doing this, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I was feeling so great, and now I'm just feeling very despondent.
Well, I think shocked.
Yeah.
A lot of us are in shock. It's like you see an accident, and so people are shocked.
Yeah.
But like if you see an accident and you think, oh my God, and you drive so carefully for a little while, but then eventually you go back to driving the way you always drive.
Mm-hmm.
So here's an opportunity. Hopefully, enough of us will make use of it for positive change.
Yeah. Amen.